Every day I'm hustling, 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 every day I'm hustling.
Hello, and welcome. You are listening to the Hustle Points NBA show. I am your, let's see, what do I want to call myself this time? Vape God. There's a vape next to me. That's appropriate. Rudy St. Clair, and joining me today is the one and only RustyBuckets. How you doing today, Rusty?
I was doing great until you called yourself a vape god.
I don't vape. It's not my vapes. They're just here. I promise. Today we're going to be going over Game 1 and doing a little bit of Game 2 preview. So hope you enjoy. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at NBA_Rudy. And of course, subscribe to RustyBuckets on YouTube and follow him on Twitter at RustyBuckets321. So you've been doing okay, other than my vape god comment? That you know.
Yeah,
that's
channel's doing well, so I'm in a good mood. That's pretty much what I base the entirety of my happiness on. So,
which is a very healthy behavior.
Just know, as long as the channel's doing well, I'm doing well.
I'll be sure not to try to sabotage your channel for a prank, because I know how directly connected it is to your humanity.
Yeah.
So, Game 1, what's this? Just your gut reaction? What are your thoughts, just off the top of your head? How did you feel? Because I think anyone who listens to my show should know how I feel, because I recorded my feelings in real time, and I about cried just out of pure joy every time Mark touched the ball. So how
do I feel about the result, or how do I feel about what I wanted to happen?
I mean, are those things really separate in any meaningful way?
A little bit.
All right, go ahead. Feel free to explain.
Because expectations versus what you want are not always the same. In terms of what I wanted, I changed my Twitter name to Raptors fan since the finals started. So it's pretty clear who I'm rooting for.
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't love Kawhi Leonard so much and Kevin Durant wasn't going to get a ring if the Warriors won the series, I probably would be pretty neutral. But the last thing I want is Kevin Durant to get a ring from not even fucking playing. So,
yeah.
So I was happy the Raptors won. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say that I haven't really been playing too much 2K in the past year, but when I do, I play 2K11 on my 360, and I just had this one association mode where my goal was just to fix LeBron's legacy, because that is just a perfect point to do it. And the only major failure of the whole experiment was part of his 7 rings. One of them came in a series in which he didn't play, so that adds a lot of nuance to the hypothetical debate there.
Did he average 17 points versus the Mavs still, or did you fix that?
No, I fixed that for sure.
Yeah, that was kind of a bad one.
Yeah, that's exactly the right point.
In terms of being like what I expected, I wasn't shocked that the Raptors won, especially on their home court.
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't know if you want me to go into predictions for the series yet, but I think basically I'll explain later when we get to that. But my prediction for the series is it goes 7 games and the Warriors win Game 7 on the Raptors' home court. I think everything outside of that, it's going to be whoever has home court advantage wins. Although I could see the Warriors beating them in Game 2. I don't know. I'm talking out of my ass here.
Hey, we all are. Don't worry about it.
I will take my cookie whenever for talking shit about how stupid people were to say that Pascal Siakam would get shut down by Draymond Green. Because he had an amazing game.
The best game.
Other than that, I was surprised that Leonard did so poorly, and surprised that even though he did so poorly, the Raptors were still able to control the game for pretty much all of it. Not only did they win, but they were, it wasn't really, there was times where the score was like 3 or 4 points, but it never felt like the Raptors were losing control. And that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think basketball is kind of similar to soccer in that way. And you know, even just looking at the scoring summaries, the box scores, and whatever, you can never really tell who has control over the game unless you're actually watching it. And watching that game, the Raptors were definitely in total control the entire game, even when it was within 3 points with like 9 minutes left or whatever. It felt like it should have been a 10-point lead at that point.
I'll take your word for it.
My biggest surprise for the whole thing, honestly, was that Fred VanVleet managed to play as good as he did on the defensive side of the equation. Here's a fun little factoid I heard across a couple of different podcasts. It's probably like some synergy stat or whatever. I don't know how to actually track down these sorts of advanced numbers. But Fred VanVleet has guarded Curry 72 possessions out of the matchups they've had this season, including the one regular season game, which Curry played against the Raptors, and, of course, game 1. And in both of those games, Curry went 1 of 6 from the field with, the 5.5 foot tall Fred VanVleet on him. And so I thought
he's not that short.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm confusing Steady Freddy with myself.
Yeah, I was gonna say, aren't you the little man?
Yeah, I'm the manlet of NBA Twitter. What can I say?
Yeah, so I think he's like 5'11" or 6 foot.
Yeah.
And he's pretty well built, so he's not like skinny. He's pretty strong, so that matters. I'm surprised by that though, because no one really thinks of defense when they think of Fred VanVleet. Not that he's bad, but it's kind of like DeMar DeRozan, where you don't really have an opinion one way or the other on his defense. You're just like, oh yeah, all right.
Yeah, he's definitely turned into like the modern Corey Joseph between like the massive playoff drought and then like the surprising defense for a season. I mean, not even a season. The finals isn't a season. I meant series, but whatever. Fred VanVleet, I mean, I jokingly call him Steady Freddy just because he's kind of a streaky guy the way I see it. But man, ever since he had his second child, Freddie Jr., he has just been absolutely on fire.
That's sarcastic, because I was like, I'm pretty sure he's been pretty damn inconsistent in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Steady is not the term I would use.
I actually I lifted that from a Dolan meme I saw where it is like a sequel to a Raptors Goons versus LeBron Dolan comic, where it was like, don't worry, LeBron, we're going to take you down this year. We have a LeBron stopper. And then it's just PJ Tucker going, please stop. And LeBron saying no. And then it's like,
oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the follow-up to that was like
really poorly drawn.
Yeah. The Dolan
like
style.
Microsoft Paint.
Mm-hmm. And then there was a follow-up to that where it's just after PJ Tucker left, but they still had like the bench mob. It was just everyone, including a guy named Steady Freddy, going, pulls stop. LeBron still saying no. Any other big surprises other than the disappointment of Kawhi's performance and Steady Freddy?
As soon as I saw the game start and I saw Danny Green was in the starting lineup, I was literally like, really?
Oh yeah.
Really?
We
why is he still starting at this point? And then he had the best game he's had all playoffs. There's something close to it.
Yeah, man. Me and you can definitely take a direct responsibility for that, because everything the fans do, both at home and in the stadium, have a direct impact on the outcome of the game. And
of course.
we reverse jinxed him big time, because I replied to you when you tweeted that and said something along the lines of, I mean, he's at least 6 fouls. That's valuable at the very least. But it turned, he didn't need that at all.
I mean, Norman Powell and VanVleet thoroughly outplayed them outplayed him for the playoffs. But
yeah, and Norman Powell hasn't even had a good playoffs. Like, he hasn't had some big game or even a major hot streak. He's just kind of been there and has been, he's looked like a Wayne Selden.
He had some moments versus the Bucks. He had some moments where it was like, wow, I didn't know he could do that. Like, he hit a couple of pull-up threes out of the pick and roll and mid-range pull-ups. I'm like, I didn't think Fred VanVleet could do that shit. Or not Fred VanVleet, Norman Powell.
Yeah, the old Norm.
Norman's career has been weird, because as a rookie, as a second-round pick, it was like, wow, this guy's really good for a second-round pick. And then the next year, is this his second or third season?
I think this is his third. I'm not 100% sure about that.
So like next year, the next 2 years, he hasn't really played that much. He's only getting like garbage time or playing like 10, 15 minutes a game. And then in these playoffs and then parts of like towards the end of this season, I remember he was like doing really well. So he's weird. He really reminds me of this guy that I wished was still in the league. Do you remember KJ McDaniels?
Oh yeah, dude, fucking Tankadelphia, man. He should have had so much more success.
KJ McDaniels, and he just disappeared from the NBA.
The Rockets killed him, man.
Yeah, KJ was a good bit more athletic than Norman, but their games are kind of similar to me.
KJ's got to be in some foreign league, absolutely running the show. You know, just demolishing China or whatever, because he's perfect for that.
I miss KJ.
Yeah, he was one of my favorite process Sixers for sure. I feel like if they needed to sign someone for the minimum this offseason, Philadelphia would probably gladly have him back. Let's see, do you have any disappointments? Because other than Kawhi, I would say for me, it's mostly just Andre Iguodala, the iguana, getting hurt, and Kyle Lowry.
I didn't know he got hurt.
Yeah, he was wincing at one point. I don't think there's been any report of him missing game 2, but it's definitely something to look out for. I would say he's probably less hurt than Kawhi, but, you know, Kawhi's a lot more important. He's going to stay out.
Kawhi's a robot. He's just going to get a replacement part and he'll be good.
Yeah, definitely. I swear, I think he has like a very serious injury that like he's kind of hiding. Like I feel like the whole Spurs debacle thing with, you know, that organization not really respecting his own opinion about his body. I think that's sort of still an existing conundrum for Kawhi Leonard, where he's only pushing through that injury now when it really, really matters, because he's not playing full speed out there. At least I don't think so. So, any disappointments beyond all that for you?
You mentioned Kyle Lowry. Do you think he had a bad game? Because I didn't.
No, I don't think he had a bad game at all. And I think people who say he had a bad game didn't watch the game.
They're just looking at the box score. There's this old thing there's this game that Larry Bird had in the playoffs. I don't know what specific game or what team, but he made some statement about it that's always stuck with me. It kind of reminds me of Kobe in Game 7 versus the Celtics in 2010 as well. If shooting poorly from the field or not scoring a whole lot of points doesn't necessarily equal playing a bad game. What is a bad game is when you don't do what you're supposed to do. You make mistakes constantly. You take dumb shots. If you play the game the same way that you always do and you just miss your shots this time more than you make, that's still a good game. Like Larry Bird had a game in the playoffs where he was like 4 for 19, but he pulled down 20 rebounds, played great defense, and got like a couple of assists as well. And people were like, oh, Larry Bird had a terrible game. He shot so poorly from the field. But it was like he did what he could to what he had going for him for that day. So in my opinion, having a bad shooting night and then still having a big impact, if anything, is more impressive than having a really good scoring night efficiently.
Yeah, I could definitely agree with you 100%. Although I do think that some people might flame you on Twitter if you put that into a tweet format and mention Kyle Lowry and Larry Bird in the same sentence.
It's not about the comparison.
Yeah.
Yes, Kyle Lowry is basically as good, if not better, than Larry Bird. Just post that on Twitter without context.
That'll be how I hype this episode right before I tweet it.
RustyBuckets says Kyle Lowry is better than Larry Bird, ? In the title.
Yep, little audio clip of you saying exactly that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at the box score here, and you know, I'm not really big into certain statistics. Like, I think VORP, for example, has some fundamental flaws to it, but you know, people who
most advanced stats are stupid.
Yeah,
just straight up.
For sure.
There are way too many. What's the word I'm looking for? There are way too many variables that are out of a player's control for so many advanced stats.
For sure. Like, you have to have like a really good theoretical framework to like insert the statistics into with like really good reason before you just throw the numbers out there. And so me throwing out this very non-advanced stat, but is still sort of advanced. Like I feel like the average fan doesn't really care about plus minus very much. When you look at the box score and you see that Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet and Kawhi Leonard all led the team with plus 11, it's hard to dispute that in combination with Kyle Lowry's poor shooting performance when he also had a 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio and got, half a dozen rebounds. Like that's a good game.
I agree he had a good game, but plus minus, especially when it's just from one game, is far too many variables. Like simply being on the court while your team is doing well and you having little influence on that, you'll end up having a positive plus minus. Like Pascal Siakam obviously played better than Kyle Lowry, but you just said he had a lower plus minus than Kyle Lowry did. So right. Even then, I think plus minus in the long term, like over a whole season, I think plus minus is valid. Mm-hmm. But that also depends a lot on if your team has a good bench. Because if your team has a good bench, the starters don't seem as impactful as they are. Right. And that's why I think value over replacement player is one of the dumbest advanced stats. Because that's literally like, if you have a shitty backup, then your team, you're going to have a better value over replacement player than someone who has a good backup. Like I made a video on Russ's 2017 MVP, and someone brought up value over replacement player for the reason why Russ should have won. And it's like James Harden had a 6th man of the year backing him up. Russell Westbrook had Norris Cole and that Christensen guy. Like, that's not a comparable situation at all.
Yeah, both of which are like backups for Raymond Felton, who is like not even close to the same tier as a Lou Williams and whatnot. It's interesting to me to look at plus minus and whatnot and like think about advanced stats, but I can't put too much stock into them on their own. Like you look at VORP and it makes LeBron look like he is by far and away the undisputed greatest of all time, hands down, no questions asked, because he leads that statistic so much more significantly than anybody else ever. It's like a 10 or 20 point margin.
I don't think LeBron has ever played on a team with a good bench in his career. Like straight up. Mm-mm. That's the problem. I don't think his teams have always been, and Cleveland in the first time, he just had a bunch of teammates who sucked pretty much without fail outside of a handful of guys. And then in Miami and then Cleveland the second time, the team was way too high in cap because they had 2 other all-star players on the roster and a bunch of other shitty contracts. Shout out to Tristan Thompson and J.R. Smith. And so a problem for LeBron teams has always been the bench. So it's hard to say, value over replacement player. Jordan, for example, since those two are always being compared, had Tony Kukoc off of the bench for a good amount of his career. That's a really damn good 6th man, and I bet you he filled in for Jordan a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And you know what? Michael Jordan is the 2nd leader of all time.
Yeah, I figured he was.
Yeah. It's I don't have it in front of me right now, but I believe LeBron, Michael, and 1 or 2 other players are the only guys with VORPs over 100. And Michael's is like 105 or something like that, and LeBron's is like 119. Like it's an insane difference. And Kukoc probably single-handedly brought that number down for Michael very significantly.
Although the Kukoc was only there for like 4 or 5 years of his career, so you can't really say it was. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how the math works out, so. Like I said,
I don't know if a 14-point difference is massive or like, all right.
Yeah, who knows? It's hard to tell.
This might be premature to announce, but me and Mojo99 are starting a podcast, and probably one of the first ones we do is going to be LeBron versus MJ. So I'll save some of that for later.
Yeah, please do. That sounds like it's going to be good shit. Hell yeah.
Because He's a big LeBron stan, and I am a big not.
Yeah, man. You and Mojo are some of the cooler dudes on NBA YouTube for sure. That's a perfect pairing. One big surprise from game one for me, I guess to get a little bit back more on track, is the Mark on Steph action. That was the most entertaining bit of it all for me, was seeing probably about 2 minutes at the bottom of the second quarter where it was just Marc Gasol versus Stephen Curry. And like, I don't think any expert in NBA anything, Twitter, traditional media,
like who's
anything,
anchoring their team, not like
no, like legitimately the individual
like, both
matchup.
of them are gonna get killed.
Yeah, they killed each other for 2 minutes at the end of the second quarter. There was a mismatch in the low post where it was Mark on Steph, and he just made a quick turnaround Jay, and immediately Steph looked like he was just like an angry 7-year-old playing 2K and holding down sprint and charging at the basket with the point guard, except that for whatever reason, Mark was just happened to be the nearest defender, and Steph blazed by him, put him in jail behind him, and drew a foul, almost got an and one. And then about a minute later...
Yeah, I'm remembering this now.
Yeah. Then about a minute later, Mark got away with a reach-in with about 10 seconds left and swatted the ball upwards into the stands and stopped the clock with 2 seconds left. And I was like, oh man, no one thought that Mark versus Steph was going to be a matchup that mattered, but clearly it's very important.
Yeah, I know you got a big old boner for Marc Gasol.
Giant boner for Marc Gasol. I mean, it's not even just Mark, it's the idea of Mark, the concept of like the spirit of the whole grit and grind era is just being carried by the 7-foot Spaniard that, anchored the team in the past. For Toronto right now is so exciting. He said to the press at some point, I don't know exactly who he said it to, but like, I'm doing this for all my former Grizzlies teammates. This isn't verbatim, but he said something along the lines of like, I'm doing this for all my old teammates, Mike, Tony, Zach, especially.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, that made my heart warm and fuzzy. Like I just got a double shot of whiskey.
Rings,
Hey man, I think if Toronto manages to fuck up this series, I think the first move they make is just a Kyle Lowry for Mike Conley swap, because why not? Fuck it.
I think Legend of Winning discussed that. He did. It was like they should swap Kyle for Mike just because Mike doesn't really fumble in the playoffs and he's more reliable than Kyle Lowry. Even though Lowry overall has had good playoffs, he's had like 3 games where it was like, dude, what the hell are you doing?
Yep. And those games will haunt him the rest of his career. The NBA, I feel, more than any other sport, has a stronger bias towards just the reputation of a player rather than the actual output that they have. Kyle Lowry has like 3
and
goose
I think
eggs.
they also love pulling up receipts.
Yeah. Part of the appeal of the NBA is like the real world drama element of it all. It's like a reality TV show and a sport.
Oh hell yeah! So I'm fucking drowning with having to go 2 days in between each game. I'm suffering.
Hey, I mean, freaking, there was a week off between the conference finals and the finals, and all NBA Twitter had to talk about was just NBA Twitter shit and bringing up receipts with a freaking O-ring scout guy.
Oh my god. Let's not get into that.
Hold on a sec.
I deadass thought it would be. I almost made a video on that whole thing just because it was so funny to me.
Yeah, that shit was hilarious, man. I feel like slightly involved in it, just because like I'm one of the thousands of people
involved in it. Like it was like he was a bear and I was trying to poke it and he just wasn't responding.
Do you read his...
I literally just added him and then just said you suck, just to piss him off.
Yeah, that was great. Did you see his 5,000 word manifesto on his website?
No.
You should give it a read. It's kind of fucking insane. And the last line of it is pretty haunting. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it left me feeling uneasy.
Well, did you see, this is the one that I had a really, I just laughed my ass off on, where, his burner account.
Yeah.
He's literally, with his burner account, said that himself could get any woman that he wanted to because he was an former NBA scout.
He was like,
did you see that one?
Yeah, it was something along the lines of like, who do you think a girl's gonna choose? The guy with a replica jersey or the guy with the team distributed quarter zip and an Apple Watch, but taking a phone call on it before it was cool or something like that. I was like, yo, this guy's deranged.
Yeah, seriously.
No, I don't want to slander him too much. He's probably
I'm running
fine.
out of video ideas. I might go with it.
Yeah, you should definitely consider breaking down his manifesto, because he tries to I don't think he's a bad guy. That's my thing. Like, I think he's mostly.
No, I definitely do.
I tend to be very charitable towards people. It's because even if you're trying to make people out to be good people and yet they still manage to just be shitty, then you know it's not your fault. You know what I mean? So I'm still giving him the benefit of the doubt. My thesis is that he just is very overconfident because of his knowledge of the X and O's factor, but he is just a really shitty media communicator. Like, he doesn't know how to tweet. He doesn't know how to write. His videos are fine.
I generally have zero respect for people who will literally go out of their way to say, I know more than you. Unless it's blatantly obvious, it's the biggest dumbass in the world and he's being an asshole, then you can be like, yeah, I know more than you. iDubbbz did that when in his content cop against Keemstar. He was literally I know more, I'm smarter than you. And I'm like, yeah, you're allowed that one. But if he just has a disagreement with somebody, he's like, shut up, I know more than you.
My favorite part about the whole debacle is that just seems to be his default response to an opposing argument. He just argues from authority. He's like, listen.
Yeah, it makes it seem like you don't actually have a strong point.
Yeah, I mean, it's a logical fallacy. You spend 2 days in a philosophy class in college or what the fuck ever, and that's one of the first things you learn is just the list of fallacies, and from authority is one of them. Yeah. So what is your authoritative prediction for game 2? I see that was a nice little segue. I'm proud of myself.
If Kawhi bounces back, has a good game like he has been, and then Pascal has a comparable performance to game 1. I think definitely Raptors win that. It doesn't have to be as ridiculous, but just be have a good game, Pascal. So X factor would have to be Kawhi Leonard. I mean, that's not a huge shocker. I think the only thing missing from game 1 was Kawhi playing really well. And I think if the Raptors can repeat what they did in game 1, Pascal having a good game doesn't have to be a 13 of 15 performance again, but 20 points on decent efficiency, and Kawhi has his now standard 30 points on really good efficiency. If Kawhi shows up and plays well, Pascal has another good game, I think the Raptors win pretty easily. But if either Pascal reverts back to some of the questionable games that he's been having in the playoffs, or Kawhi struggles again, possibly because of injury, who knows? I think the Warriors are going to win because I think Curry is going to come back and feel more impactful than his stats indicated. And I think Klay Thompson is going to be more than just there. The thing with Steph in game 1 was he had 30 points, but you didn't really feel like he had 30 points. He had a couple of moments, but his feeling having a moment where it's oh yeah, the Warriors can take this one. He was pretty much just scoring because obviously someone had to score. Not in a way that was it's hard to explain. No. Not in a way that was uplifting the Warriors to make a run. So if he has, I think he's going to be more like that in game 2. And I think if Klay Thompson really shows up, because in game 1 he didn't play bad, at least statistically, I don't think he did. But he also, with KD out, he needs to step up. And I don't feel like he stepped up in game 1. So if he does that, Curry feels more impactful, and either Pascal or Kawhi are just mediocre, then I definitely give that to Warriors. And I would probably predict Raptors in Game 2 by a slim margin. Because I think it's going to be a little bit of a mix of both of the scenarios, and it's going to end up being a close game. And like I said earlier, I think it's just going to come down to home court advantage.
Yeah, that's a very, very significant factor for me as well, is this Toronto crowd. They are coming to play themselves.
Like, the Warriors have the Oracle and, like, the Bay Area. The Raptors have a fucking country. And the entirety of pretty much every other NBA fan base in the world backing them up. So there's some, in terms of, not that being the villain equals losing, but in terms of feeling support, the Raptors definitely got a lot more of that than the Warriors do.
Definitely. And, speaking of Klay Thompson, I feel like he came out really aggressive from the jump, like about as aggressive as I've ever seen Klay Thompson
but it
play.
Felt like he just reverted back to normal.
Yeah, like he got those 2 dunks.
Typical of Klay Thompson. Like, MEO pointed this out in a video. Like, sometimes they just go to Klay Thompson early and get him started, and then it just reverts back to normal. And that's weirdly something that the Bulls in 2016 used to do with Taj Gibson. Like, Taj would always score like 14 points a game, and he'd score like 10 of them in the first quarter every fucking time. It was just really funny.
Maybe he just got gassed and didn't really have the energy to efficiently make buckets, at the end of the game. Because I feel like even if you're gassed, you can still put an effort on defense, kind of sacrifice your body a little bit. But actually putting the ball in the basket takes a certain level of finesse, and to get that finesse, you need to have your reserve energy.
Well, especially because Taj Gibson offensively, if he's going one-on-one, it's post-ups, and post-ups are tiring.
Yeah, for sure.
I can speak from my middle school experience. Posting up is exhausting.
Oh, yeah.
It's probably the most tiring thing outside of running back and forth that you can do on a basketball court. As long as you have a good matchup, that is.
Yeah, shoot. And with the Dubs, I mean, they're probably going to exhaust themselves until Kevin Durant comes back. I kind of hope that he doesn't come back if I had it my way.
100%.
Yeah, if I had it my way, it'd be the whole series. But I would like to see him not come back until like a Game 4 or Game 5. But if he came back Game 3 and was like hobbling around, that wouldn't be too bad either. But I mean, Kevon Looney is getting 28 minutes a game, and Jordan Bell is starting. So Kevon
Looney deserves 28 minutes a game. Give the man 48 minutes a game. He deserves that shit.
Yeah.
There's no negative in Kevon Looney getting minutes. He's really good.
Yeah.
I mean, he's probably in like a Clint Capella type situation where he's really benefiting from the system more than he is actually talented. But I mean, it's not like that really matters to the Warriors right now.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It might matter to a team that tries to sign him this offseason, but it doesn't matter to the Warriors.
Yeah, I feel like they almost kind of nerfed Looney at a few points during the playoffs just to be like, oh, maybe if we can make him seem a little bit less valuable by playing him slightly less, we can manage to retain him. But there's no way.
I think some team is going to throw him 10 mil.
Yeah, for sure. I'm thinking he's going to be in like a 10 or 11 mil range myself.
Yeah.
DeMarcus Cousins was a total non-factor. I mean, that he played.
He was there. Forward. I'll give him that. He played in minutes.
Yeah.
On the basketball court. I didn't expect that after that injury, but
I saw a tweet comparing him to Shaq on the Celtics, and I got a good photo out of that. Yeah.
Like, what's the difference between these two photos? And I saw one of them said one of these guys has 4 rings.
That's good shit. Oh man, that's fucking good.
But I think they were hoping that, bringing him off of the bench, he would hopefully be some scoring punch off of their bench because there's no scoring off of this bench. Right. Shout out to Alfonso McKinney.
Man, my resident Warriors
plays
fan,
so much.
He loves Alfonso McKinney. He used to be my boss, but he absolutely loves Alfonso McKinney. He watches every Warriors game. Just my friend. He used to be my boss, and he's a Warriors fan. Well, he just doesn't claim Warriors fanhood. He claims Klay Thompson fanhood, and I'm just like, all right. But he loves Alfonso McKinney too. So it'll be cool to see him get some more minutes. It'll be really cool to see Pat McCaw get some more minutes too, because he did really well in his limited time going up against his old team, fighting for that three-peat, that personal three-peat.
I mean, good for him. I don't agree. He had a couple of good minutes, but this is a goddamn NBA Finals. I don't understand why Patrick McCaw was getting minutes. He did not play, other than garbage time, I don't think he played at all in the playoffs. And then now you're like, oh, let's put him in a close game in the NBA Finals. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, shoot. I would take him over Jody Meeks. So I'm content with just Jody.
Maybe Nick Nurse was like going for maybe he'll have a revenge game.
Exactly. He was just like, hey, I'm sure you know these guys.
NBA Finals Patrick McCaw revenge game. That's not a story you expected to hear.
It's a story that nobody's talking about. We need to get the word out. Free Pat McCaw. But I would say, honestly, this whole series, more than anything else, more than Kyle Lowry having a decent scoring performance or not, more than Kawhi's injury, more than Boogie or the Splash Bros or Draymond getting triple doubles, is Marc Gasol. I know I'm biased as hell, but Mark having a essentially perfect game absolutely won them the game. I mean, from the moment he made that first three-pointer to get his first bucket of the game, where he absolutely didn't hesitate at all, was like, oh shit, Mark is in sixth gear. I haven't seen this since he was in the playoffs. And then he got that other three-pointer just a couple minutes later where he did the exact opposite thing, where he does the thing he always does, where he catches the ball wide the fuck open, looks to his right, and then hesitates some more, and then thinks about shooting, and then shoots. Except this time he just tapped his foot inside the line a few times to make a little dance out of it all. But if he can keep being aggressive...
I might give you that, really, not despite your bias.
I mean, if he could look like 2013 Marc Gasol out there, this series is at the very least going to 7 games, but I think it's the difference between the Raptors winning and losing the whole thing.
Well, I agree, because Marc Gasol is essentially what Al Horford was to the Boston Celtics, or I should say is, unless he leaves this offseason.
Yes. That's a perfect comparison.
He's like, yeah, he's not going to put up crazy stats. He's also a poor rebounder, and he's a great passer. He can hit an open three. It's not the best shot in the world, but you're sure as hell not going to cry about it. He can post up on a mismatch. I don't know if I mentioned him being a damn good passer, but he's a damn good passer. Funky Diabetic in his video about the Raptors versus the Warriors literally said that he thinks Marc Gasol is the best passer on the Raptors, and that's honestly not an insane opinion.
Oh no, that's totally fair. Even though Kyle Lowry, at multiple points this season, I don't know if he ended up being the total leader, but at multiple points over the course of the season, he was the leader in assists per game. Doesn't matter. Yeah. Mark's still a better passer. I mean,
how much you average versus how talented you actually are is not, one and the same.
Yeah.
And then defensively, Mark is a fucking boss. The one problem that I was afraid would get exposed versus the Warriors, and I think they should do a better job of attacking him, is getting him out onto the perimeter and forcing him to guard Steph.
Yes.
Because Mark versus Steph is barbecue chicken.
It's the most important individual matchup of the whole series, man. I'm telling you.
No.
Yeah, man. Mark is definitely not fleet of feet. Fred Van Fleet of feet. But he is just fast enough to keep up and make a difference if he puts 100% effort in and doesn't have any missteps. But if he makes one mistake or slows down even a little bit, he's getting blown the fuck by or getting cooked on a step back or whatever. Like
he had a possession versus the Bucks. I put out a whole thread ranting about it. It was, I don't know if you saw it.
I actually did. I'd love to go back and find it after this.
Well, there was a possession versus the Bucks. This was in crunch time, and Mark handed it off to Kawhi, and then he immediately ran to the right. Ran to the right side of the court, not quite at the corner, but corner mid-range.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an isolation. Kawhi versus, I think, Middleton. Or no, I think it was Kawhi versus, it was versus Middleton. And basically every player, besides for Kawhi and Middleton, are on the right side of the court. Mark, very stupidly, and it annoys me that he does this because he's generally such a high IQ player, cuts into the right mid-range when he should have gone to the left 3. Because what that did was it completely fucked the spacing to the point where Kawhi could no longer go inside, and he ended up being forced to take a bad three-pointer because the way it was, basically, who was the defender? I think it was Giannis. Basically could defend both Pascal in the corner and Gasol in the corner. So basically Gasol put it into the situation where Brook Lopez was able to just stand at the paint and just wait for Kawhi. Like, he literally just set it up to basically force Kawhi to shoot the three-pointer. And it bothered me so much because I'm like, you're better than this, Mark.
You know,
but, I mean, they won the series, so I guess it doesn't matter.
I mean, no bullshit. I really think I remember the play that you're talking about and feeling similarly. Yeah. I think the difference is that my interpretation of was why the hell did they draw it up this way? But it being a player error seems much more likely because Nick Nurse is a very, very smart coach. Obviously, I don't think he would make that sort of elementary mistake. I think Nick Nurse is going to win the Raptors 2 games on his own just by making better adjustments. Like, I know coaches.
That good.
I mean, I know coaches aren't that big of a factor in the NBA, but I think.
No, that's not. I disagree with that.
Really?
That's a common thing people say. I completely disagree.
See, the way I view coaches is that there's a very small handful of guys that are actually a net positive. Most of the guys don't really make a difference. And then there's another small handful of guys that actually make a lot of them.
Their job is just to not fuck things up.
Exactly. That's how most of them go about their jobs. But I think there's probably 5 or 6 coaches that actually make a net positive impact, and Nick Nurse is definitely one of them. And side note, Coach Budenholzer is definitely not.
I struggle with that because I do think Mike Budenholzer is a good coach. But
he's a good coach. I just don't think he's a great coach. He
showed a lack of versatility in Bucks versus Raptors, like a lot. Like, he saw how poorly the team was at creating shots with the Raptors defense, and he just made zero adjustment. He was just like, keep doing what we've been doing all season. It hasn't fucking worked, but I don't know, do it again. I mean, it's like, that's clearly not the game plan. What they should have done, the internet YouTube personality who knows more than an NBA head coach, what they should have done was...
I can feel O-Ring turning in his proverbial grave.
They should have either gotten Brogdon or Middleton in the pick and roll with Giannis. What they did so much in the regular season, and I know this because I watched a lot of Bucks games because Giannis is my favorite non-Bulls player. What they did during the regular season a lot was Giannis was on ball like half the time. Mm-hmm. Like, he was actually like the guy at the top of the key dribbling the ball like 50%, probably more like 40% of the time. And pizza burp.
We all know burping is permissible on this show. You didn't have to hold it.
And then what they would also do is post him up and get him in the pick and roll, because Giannis is a phenomenal pick and roll player as the roll man for obvious reasons. But what they did so much is the Raptors would put up versus the Raptors, they put up a wall of defense, and they were like, yeah, Giannis, attack this wall of defense and see what happens. And nothing happened because they weren't doing any off-ball shit with him anymore. They're just like, well, it's the playoffs. You got to give it to your best player. But Giannis ain't that type of dude.
No, he don't know how good he is yet. And it was obvious that whole conference finals.
Well, it's not just about that. Though it definitely is partially about that. Part of the problem was Giannis is really a big man that sometimes does guard stuff. He's not a guard that does big man stuff. He's a big that does guard shit. And he put out a statement talking about how he's going to improve upon his game. He was like, I have the mentality of a big man, and I need to start improving the guard aspects of my game. And I do agree with that in terms of the development of his game. But in terms of how Budenholzer should have utilized him, he should have recognized that, especially in the playoffs of all places, in the conference finals, and gotten the guy some big man plays, not this guy is Kevin Durant and Tracy McGrady and Kobe Bryant. He's not. That's not the type of dude he is. You need to run plays for him like he's Anthony Davis, except, less mid-range plays.
Yeah, man. If he could get some of those signature AD, Clint Capella, rim running, pick and roll style plays going on with like Brogdon and Bledsoe over the next year or two, that would be some serious chemistry and a play that I feel like would not only get you 2 points over 60% of the time, but also just be something that really puts some momentum on your side of the game too. When you get a Giannis alley-oop, I don't know how many times he's ran the rim.
Yeah, I agree,
but he could do it.
They did do pick and roll stuff during the regular season, like I said, not so much the lob stuff, but just a typical 1950s pick and roll, just with a 7-foot alien instead of a skinny white dude.
Yeah.
And they, what am I trying to say here? Shit.
It's okay.
Okay, I got you. Okay, so people were talking about his playmaking, and I agree the playoffs had exposed that he's not quite as good as the stats would indicate, because like 6.5 assists per game for someone who dribbles the ball the amount that he does is pretty damn good. But literally the area where Giannis is the best at playmaking is in the post. And they also ran very few post-ups in the playoffs. The problem was he kept... Damn, I shouldn't have ate pizza before this.
Just let it out, man.
The problem with Giannis' playmaking in that series was that he kept dribbling into these wall of defenders, like I said, because they had no other creative plays. And then there were so many times where he was surrounded by 3 dudes and forced to, make a pass to, out of a tough situation. You can't really blame him for not, landing that well.
Yeah.
Even though I agree he's not as good as his stats indicate, he's also not bad. The area where I don't know that it's where he gets most of his assists, but I'd say 90% of them come from him being at the basket, getting a double team, and then a shooter is open. It also didn't help that the Bucks shooters really didn't play that well in this series.
Oh, yeah. Bledsoe especially completely shit the bed. He looked worse than Kyle Lowry.
He's not a shooter. But
I mean, he takes them. He makes them on occasion. But didn't he make like
is
2?
Is that all the requirement to being a shooter? Then I guess Josh Smith was a shooter.
He wanted to be a shooter so bad. God damn. Josh Smith should have been born 5 years later, man. He would be an incredible stretch 4 in the modern NBA, but he was just ever so barely too early.
Yeah.
Let's get back to game 2 predictions. Before we go too deep into Josh Smith lore. I think a big change that needs to happen on the Warriors side of the equation is that Draymond Green needs to play the 5 spot. And they need to put out the death lineup and say, hey, I know y'all have the size advantage, but y'all beat the shit out of us on the fast break last game. And even though y'all are bigger, we had way more second chance points than y'all just because you didn't care to get defensive rebounds as much as we did. So let's beat you at your own game because your game is our game.
I also think you can finish what you were saying.
No, that was it. And they just need to run the break more.
Cut off for me, so.
No, they just need to run the break more.
There's so many times where there's like you start talking, but like it's delayed, and I start talking, and like, oh shit, I interrupted him. It's awkward.
Oh yeah, just a little bit of lag. It's okay. Nothing wrong with some latency. We can edit around it. We have magic.
Yeah. I just want the people at home to not know that I'm a douche, but not know that I'm a douche. But wait, what? Know that I am not a douchebag.
There you go.
That's what I'm trying to say. Jesus.
You know what's funny? I heard you say douche like 2 or 3 times, and immediately my brain just filled in the gap with canoe.
What?
You never heard douche canoe?
I feel like I have, but
I don't know what it's a reference to, but I know I've heard it. I've heard enough times to where you said douche, and immediately I was just like, yeah, douche canoe. You don't want to be a douche canoe. I get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds like some middle school shit, but what the hell were we talking about?
Do you think Draymond should play the 5 more often, or do you think that?
Yes, because I think offensively, that's a great way to attack Marc Gasol. Get him in the pick and roll. Steph Draymond pick and roll is a deadly combination. Either Gasol has to deal with the quicker Draymond, or he has to switch on to Curry, and both of those are not ideal for him.
Yeah.
Again, I know you love Marc Gasol, but he is the most attackable player on this team for sure.
Definitely.
And I think the Warriors should do a better job of trying to make that happen.
And I don't think that's even really a big slight at Marc Gasol. I think it's just a statement about the type of player he is. This Raptors team just happens to be full of guys who are super long and athletic. You know, Siakam is an incredible tweener. You know, Serge is still pretty quick and has lots of length and really good defensive instincts. And then Fred VanVleet is their shortest guy, and clearly he's not exploitable on defense. So yeah, it really is Marc. But Marc is still an incredible defensive player. This is the only time in the past 5 years that the Warriors are the worst defensive team when you look at defensive rating over the regular season.
Their defense has dropped off every year. It's really surprising. You would think adding a 7-footer with 8-9 feet long wingspan who tries on defense and is actually pretty damn good would improve their defense. But it's just like, I think as the Warriors have, become great, their focus on like being a really good defensive team has dropped just because they're like, we got this shit. We don't need to try that hard on defense. Obviously, I don't think that's the case in the finals, and I think they can turn it up to another level, but I think, they're not as good as they should be. For sure.
I think Draymond's going to be playing a really similar role to Marc on defense heading more into the future, because he was doing a lot of one-on-one matchups in game 1. And I look to see him more often kind of roaming around and being the guy who can look like he's guarding 3 guys at once that we all know Draymond is. And
that's what I was talking about in my Pascal tweet about Draymond. Draymond is probably, hopefully this doesn't come off as an overstatement, but I think he honestly is probably the best team defender to ever live.
That's fair.
But
absolutely fair.
One-on-one, he is good. I'd say if you broke him down to just his one-on-one defense, he would be like an all-defensive second-team player.
Mm-hmm.
But like he would be like prime Trevor Ariza. That's where he is on one-on-one defense.
Yeah, I like that.
But he's not all-time great one-on-one defender. And that's why I was like, Pascal is not just going to get shut down by Draymond. He's not that good one-on-one for it to be that, like, he'll be shut down. That's one of the things that, like, people often, I've even thought this myself, was like, against the Cavs, like, why don't you put Draymond Green on LeBron? Clearly he's the most physically capable, but his one-on-one defense is not, unbelievable.
Yeah. Where Draymond makes his money is being that A++ grade help defender. One-on-one, it's a lot closer to A, maybe A+, but maybe A-.
Draymond is better assigned against the worst offensive player than the best. He'll have more defensive impact if he's guarding the worst player on the court than if he's playing the best.
Yeah, that is a very well put. Very well put. So, do you have any bona fide predictions for the series? I know you said you want it to be Raps, but you think it's going to be Warriors.
In 7.
Yeah. It's going to 7 no matter what. I had the proposition put to me at work yesterday, where one of the dudes I talk ball with most over there was saying that it would be very ceremonious and kind of nice for the Warriors to win in 6 and kind of send out Oracle Arena on the highest of high notes. But I was like, oh yeah, that is kind of beautiful. I appreciate that. I don't want it to happen, but I see what you're saying.
Who gives a shit about Oracle Oracle Arena. Fucking move on. It's just an arena change. Maybe that's insensitive of me. It's like the Bulls moved from the United Center. Some other like frozen yogurt title arena. Who gives a shit?
Can you
It's just an arena.
can you unplug and plug in your mic? It's doing the thing it does where it sounds like a bass boost meme. That was great. It just came to who the fuck gives a fuck about Oracle Arena?
Did you not hear what I said?
No, I heard it, but it was just warbled and it was funny. I'm leaving that in 100% for sure. It was too entertaining.
Who gives a shit about Oracle Arena? I don't give a shit about any arena.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm worried about is the fact that my city would pay taxes for it.
Yeah, that shit's so dumb.
Shout out to John Oliver for a great piece on stadiums. That's why I know that. I didn't know that existed before.
Oh yeah, man. Last Week Tonight, I feel like gets a lot of shit from people on the right for being just like a oh, you little liberals in your HBO show, why don't you go do your own research? It was like, man, this is clearly really good investigative journalism and shit. Like, it's perfectly good. I don't understand.
It would help
if
if John stopped saying that he's not a journalist, because it's very clear that what they do is journalistic stuff. But
yeah, for sure. I mean, all the writers on his staff and stuff are definitely doing a journalistic work.
Obviously, this is getting cut out.
No, I mean, you see, the real motivation behind Hustle Points is to eventually not have to talk about basketball anymore and to talk about shit that matters slightly more.
So you're gonna leave this in?
Yes, that's the point I'm making.
Huh?
Yeah.
All right. I opened up my video today with a political metaphor,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm literally like, I literally mentioned multiple times, like, yes, this is something from reality, but please don't get butthurt in the comments. It's just a metaphor. That didn't stop him. I don't know why I thought it would.
Yeah. So did you upload that LeBron video today?
Yeah.
Hell yeah, I'll watch it right after this. So finals predictions. I got Raps in 7. If you want to get real specific about it, I think that Kevin Durant comes back and has a very, very subtle negative influence on the Warriors and ultimately costs them the championship. And that is kind of the hump that his legacy will now be built on, that he has to get over. Is like he's the least impactful superstar of all time. That's been a narrative for a few weeks now that I'm kind of into.
Yeah, I think that's a ridiculous statement, but
I just think he's a little bit of a ball stopper, you know? Like, I think he's like a very tall.
So we gonna tackle this? Are the Warriors better without KD thing? Because I got lots to say about
Let's do it, man. I'm all about it, because I think that while the Warriors are a better 16 game team with Kevin Durant on there, I think over the course of the regular season, it's easy. It's, you know, history shows it's easier to win when you just are running guys off the line, you know, playing Warrior style basketball.
So you're pro Kevin Durant makes the Warriors worse.
I think that he makes the Warriors worse at being the Warriors, and the Warriors might be the best basketball team we've ever seen. You know, just the way they play.
I can agree with that. One of the main reasons that I'm anti that opinion that KD makes them worse is because if he does make them worse, I'm probably going to kill myself. Because that means once he leaves, they're going to be even fucking more unbeatable. But I don't agree on that. And here's why. I think too many people confuse Steph and Clay playing better for the Warriors playing better. I think the unbeatable factor with the Warriors, the like, what the hell are we going to do about this factor, does not exist with Kevin Durant sitting on the sidelines. That exists when you're looking at Stephen Curry, 2-time MVP, greatest shooter of all time, averaged 30 points per game on 40, 50, 90 fucking shooting splits. And then you see, oh yeah, here's Kevin Durant, 2014 MVP, potentially the greatest scorer of all time. And then you still got to deal with Klay Thompson, who is probably the greatest hot hand to ever live, and Draymond Green's great playmaking and defense. Like, I think you can deal with Steph because you only got to deal with one superstar if Steph is the only guy for the Warriors, unless Clay has one of his signature how the hell, what the fuck, holy shit nights.
Right. Right.
The unbeatability factor only exists with Kevin Durant. Is he a bit of a ball stopper? Yes, 100%. Does the Warriors system not run quite like it did in 2016 with Kevin Durant? 100%. But you're willing to sacrifice those things to have the potentially best player in the league on your team.
Yeah, that's the thing about Kevin Durant is that like he has all the tools. He is everything you would ever want out of virtually any basketball player, you know? And yet somehow it appears as if the team gets worse when he's on the floor with them, even though it's obvious that he's not. You know, I've hedged on it a lot, and I don't sincerely believe that they are worse off with KD out there, because it's borderline incoherent. But I do think that the Warriors has a certain element to it that is essential, and when you insert Kevin Durant into that equation, it kind of taints that, and it turns into something else. And I would rather the Warriors be the Warriors than be the Kevin Durant Warriors.
The Warriors have the second best team ball that I have ever seen. The best being the 2014 Spurs.
Yeah.
But the team ball of the Warriors is not better than Kevin Durant Warriors. Even if it's more fun and it appears like it's going better, it's very clear that they're better with Kevin Durant to me. And I think, I've been struggling for a video topic, and boom, I got one.
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. Well, Raps in 7. The
Warriors in 7.
All right. Awesome. Well, this has been a really, really fucking fun show. I think this is one of the best episodes I've ever had, just because this.
Yeah, I killed it. I know.
Yeah. You. It's all you. I have nothing to do with the success of my show.
100%.